little hard to be chipper and happy this morning. The fences are slowly going up around the beach to keep us out. And I guess they're going to be developing the slope over here. Meanwhile, things are getting put back together at La Brisa. After spending a week at Tecolote, which I will talk about a little bit more at the end of this video, we returned to La Brisa to admire her facelift. We are very pleased with the work of Chava Lopez and his crew, and I often find myself running my hand over the smooth painted surface. Chava used 3 coats of primer and 2 coats of Interlux Bright Side 1-part polyurethane. His secret, though, is in all the work, the sanding and the fairing that went into prepping La Brisa for the primer coats, and then yet more sanding of the primer coats before the paint. A tremendous amount of work. This week we are putting things together, and this time we are determined to have no further water intrusion into the cabin coring. It is unfortunate that people that should know better, like boat builders, will simply bed and screw hardware into cored cabin sides, assuming it will never leak. In the last video, we filled oversized holes with thickened epoxy, so even if we do have leakage in the future, the core will be unaffected. Lee, after clamping the port ring in place to act as a guide, drilled pilot holes into the epoxy and then screwed in short stainless steel screws to thread the holes for the softer 1-inch silicone bronze screws, which we are using to avoid dissimilar metals with the bronze ports. With the stainless steel screws holding the rings in place, I taped the outside perimeter using small pieces of tape around the curves, trying to make the curves look as smooth as possible and leaving about a 1/16 of an inch margin beyond the edge of the ring in order to encourage a border for the bedding compound to ooze out beyond the fitting. After taping the perimeter on the cabin side, I taped the inside of the port and then finally the ring itself. Initially, I was slow, but with 11 ports to tape, I became faster, and it was also a good opportunity to listen to a recorded book while I worked. I later found on the internet a suggestion for a quicker way to tape that I could have used on the rings. Simply lay the tape on and then trim away with a sharp knife, as I did with these tank vent hoods. For the sealant, we used 3M 4200, a polysulfide. With our previous boat, we experimented with butyl tape, but we are much happier with the long-term performance and sealing properties of polysulfide. 4200 isn't cheap here in Mexico since it is imported. A tube cost about $35, and we ended up using 3 tubes with a little left over for mounting other hardware, such as the covers over the tank vents. Initially, on the first port, it was hard to know how much sealant to apply, and I was a little too generous. But after a few, I got a better feel for it. The screws were tightened until snug, and there was ooze out on both sides of the bezel. But we did not tighten too much, as we did not want all the sealant squeezed out. The idea is to have enough sealant to form a gasket of sorts. If this was a piece of hardware with bolts and nuts, we would come back in a few days and snug down the nuts more. But since the bezel is secured with just screws, we will leave the screws undisturbed for fear of breaking the seal around the screws if we were to tighten the screws more. We are finding that there are some skills that one uses over and over in the course of time on a boat, and bedding and rebedding hardware is one of them. In fact, we touched briefly on bedding hardware way back in episodes 33 and 34. After spending the last few days working on bedding and putting things back together, we still have to put up the dodger and reattach the twist lock fasteners. Our time at Tecolote seems long ago. There are a couple things, though, that I would like to share. I don't know if you have ever heard the jingle about the aging of sailors. First sailboat, then motorboat, then motorhome to rest home. But it was awfully nice to be around the water in the wind and not have to worry about the anchor dragging. The other item of interest for those of you that follow Blondie's activities, there was a certain yellow dog that stretched the boundaries of freedom a little too far, got involved in a little altercation, and suffered a loss of hearing when she was called back. After that, it was the disgrace of being on a leash. Will she remember? Probably not. As for our plans, on February 1st, John and Christy from our Alaska Sailboat Cove videos are flying in to La Paz, and after they see the sights, we will all head north. Next week, it will be pedal to the metal to get La Brisa ready to go. So, until next time,